Okay, we're going to get started here. My name is Nora Luongo. I am on the internal marketing team here at WearAware. Thank you so much for joining us today for another WOW webinar. Today's topic is Google Analytics 101. We did a full-length version of this last fall, and it was really popular, and apparently by the looks of our registration numbers, it's still a really popular topic. So today we condensed some of the information, and because of that, we are recording this session. We're sending out all the slides. We also have some other resources that we have available to you after the webinar, such as how to set up your Google Analytics, because we're not going to go over to that today in today's session, and then a full-length checklist about things to keep in mind when you're going through your Google Analytics account. As always, like I said, we are recording this. We'll send the slides. If you're on Twitter, feel free to tweet along with us with the hashtag WowWebinar that you see here on the screen. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to chat them to us. We'll get to a couple of them just to be mindful of everyone's time. So if we don't get to your question or we don't answer it during the webinar, feel free to reach back out to us at our contact page, and we'll be sure to make sure we connect you with somebody to get you the right answer. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, James, to take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Nora. Hi, everyone. My name is James Guittard. I'm a digital project manager at WearAware, and I'm a Google Analytics certified specialist. I deal a lot with using GA, configuring it, and making sure that we can leverage the platform to provide important insights into online business for our customers. So a little bit about WearAware. We are an award-winning digital agency with 18 years of experience in building personalized websites, email campaigns, automation, SEO and digital advertising, visual and graphic design, building digital products, mobile apps, as well as doing advanced data integration and analytics. And of course, the analytics are what we're going to cover in this webinar. Here you can see a large number of the clients that we work with. Many of them were working in B2C and B2B context, as well as doing retail, e-commerce, and leveraging analytics to provide those insights to these groups. So let's discuss what we're going to go over in the webinar today. We're going to go over in a broad way, what is Google Analytics and why is it useful and important for you to know. We're going to cover some need-to-know terms and concepts within GA, as well as the most important thing to me, which is the process that we use to analyze the metrics and really answer important business questions from those by using real actionable data. Then we're going to follow up with some lesser-known tips and tricks that can help you, better organize your work in GA. And then finally, we're going to summarize with some key takeaways. Great. So Google Analytics. This is a very important platform, and we're going to cover some, what it is and why you want to be using it. So to me, the biggest concept that we want to understand is that Google Analytics is the most widely used analytics platform on the internet right now. Almost 94.9% of the top 200 marketing websites are using GA right now. So it's widely used, it's ubiquitous, and I think the main reasons for that are, number one, it's free, and number two, it's very powerful. And we're going to go into why that is. Great. So what is GA? Google Analytics is a premium web analytics service offered by Google that tracks and reports website traffic. That's kind of a simplified way of, talking about a pretty complex and wide-ranging tool. There are a lot of features and functionality within the Google Analytics platform. And to me, the most important thing that Google Analytics does is that it provides a single repository for all of your online web metrics and analytics. So for example, if you're using e-commerce, if you're using a website, if you're using email campaigns and social media campaigns, Google Analytics is able to collect all of the data points, all of the interaction between users, and put them into a single place that allows you to really see patterns across different channels and allows you to, in real time, generate reports that allow you to answer important business questions that we'll cover in more detail later in this webinar. So what are some need-to-know terms that we want to understand, and how do we understand the lingo to be able to communicate within GA? The first important distinction that we want to make is between users and sessions. Now, a user represents a unique visitor to your site, And this is represented with a cookie. So whenever you visit a site on the internet, it inserts a cookie that basically tracks you and provides a little bit of it's kind of a temporary digital fingerprint that represents a single user. And so Google Analytics uses that cookie to identify the user and track their progress across multiple sites on the internet and track their interactions with your web page. The session represents the total number of visits to the site, regardless of whether they're a new or returning visitor. So to kind of give an example and break that down a little bit, on the right we have a graphic that shows two users, user A and user B. The first one, A, has 3 site visits, and the second one has only a single one. And you can see that in the metrics, the aggregate represents 2 users but 4 sessions. So it's important to understand the distinction that a session represents in total how many visits to the web page there are, and the users represent on an individual level how many individual unique users are using the platform or viewing it. The bounce rate, this is an important concept because it represents Google identifies a bounce as any time you land on a web page and then leave that web page without clicking another link within it. So this is really important in terms of identifying potential issues with a website. For example, if you have a shopping cart page or a checkout page with a significantly high bounce rate, that can mean a number of things. Number one, it could be a system level issue where people are having a hard time completing the checkout process. And so if you see a high bounce rate that, on that type of page, that could be an indicator that you want to look into any technical troubleshooting. Is there any friction in the checkout process that's stopping people from completing their checkout? Another reason for that might just be personal user shopping friction. Are they having a hard time converting, or is your ad, your product copy or ad copy effective in guiding them through that checkout process? We should sometimes take the bounce rate with a grain of salt a little bit, because there are some cases where a bounce isn't a bad thing. For example, if you have a contact page on your website where people are going to it really to copy down a phone number and then reach out with you via phone or send an email, they may take the action. They might call you up, and Google will record that as a bounce. But in that particular instance, the bounce isn't really a bad thing because they're doing what you're actually asking them to do by going to the contact page and then reaching out to them. But there's not another opportunity to lead to another link within the site. So, the bounce rate is important, but we should also take it with a grain of salt sometimes. The context is important. With acquisition, so these are the most common forms of channel. In other words, how are people getting to a page on your website? Direct represents a person really entering in the URL directly into the browser and going directly to the website. So they type in your company name and go direct, then that's a direct acquisition or direct channel. Organic represents search results. So if people use Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo, whatever, they're going to appear in GA as an organic acquisition result. And then finally, referral represents any link. Anytime someone accesses your website via a link from an external website, that represents a referral. Right? And then user behavior. There are a number of important concepts within the reporting, the behavior report, that are important for us to understand. So the first one is new versus returning users. This represents someone who is a new visitor, is someone who their tracking cookie has not been tracked in the past by Google. So they represent a net new person accessing the site. Whereas a returning visitor is someone who their cookie has been identified before on the website. So you can determine, hey, is my new visitor acquisition growing, or am I getting more repeat visits from existing people who frequent the site? Frequency and recency are important in understanding how often I'm getting repeat traffic, and also how frequently, or how the recency, the time period between their last visit and the visit before that. So frequency represents the number of sessions that an individual is having, and then recency represents the time period from their most recent to their last visit. And finally, engagement. This is a very useful report that indicates how long people are staying on a web page. So this is really important in diagnosing the success of a landing page. If they're only having a 10-second duration on the page, that indicates that you might need to have more engaging or more compelling content that keeps them on that page longer. But it could also be an indicator that that web page is set up to where people are able to find the information quickly and move on to the next place. So again, we kind of have to learn to read the numbers a little bit to understand what's happening here. But like you can see in this particular example where the vast majority of users are under 10 seconds, I would say that's a pretty low engagement metric, and so we would want to increase that to where we're getting larger durations of engagement on a page. Okay, and how do we take this information and answer important business questions? So we're going to cover 5 of our favorite reports and the types of questions that they answer within GA. Great, so channels. The channel report is under the acquisition tab, and this is an important report that indicates where people are coming from to get to your page. What is the source of them accessing what is the source of the traffic to access your page? And so if we look at this report, for example, we can see that over 50% of users are being trafficked into the web page from email. And that's a pretty significant figure. Your reporting may be different. You may have the highest proportion coming from paid or organic search. But this is a really important report to look into to understand how people are really interacting with the marketing campaigns that you're presenting. If you have, for example, here we have 8 different sources for marketing traffic or our marketing mix. And so we're using email, paid search, organic search, SEO, direct traffic, referral traffic, and social and display ads. So within this, we can see that if email is successful and email is our most widely used source of information, that we definitely want to make sure that we're prioritizing email campaigns within our marketing mix. The mobile device report is found under the audience tab under the mobile overview page. And this report is really important because it shows you how people are using and interacting with the site. What devices are they using when they go to your site? Here we can see that over 65% of people are using mobile compared to desktop or laptops and tablets. And this is, again, really important when it comes to decisions around how should we design our web page and how do we want to optimize our web page to serve the types of devices that our users are actually using. If we can identify within this that the vast majority of people are using mobile, we want to make sure that we're using a mobile responsive design or a mobile first design that really optimizes the experience for people accessing the website on their phones. The third important report is the real-time report. Now, this report, I think, is less useful for answering trends or for identifying trends within historic data because it really just shows a snapshot of your data on the website within the last 20 minutes. But it is extremely useful for identifying, for example, troubleshooting issues. If you, as a user, want to make sure that you've configured your Google Analytics tagging properly on your site, you can use real-time reports to make sure that the pages you're clicking on are popping up within the real-time report. And it's also very useful for when you are launching campaigns. If you launch a big email or social campaign and you want to see in real time how effective that's performing, this can be a really good place to sort of look at, as it's happening, what's going on with your website. And then our fourth report that's really useful is the assisted conversion report. It's found under the conversion tab under the overview assisted conversions. This is useful in understanding how each particular channel drives a conversion, which might be a purchase or a form submission. It basically is determined by how you configure a conversion as a goal. But it's very important to understand what channels are the most successful at actually driving revenue. And in this case, you can see that direct traffic, which are people that essentially know your website and aren't using an external, they're not using a marketing channel to get to you. They really are already customers of you, and they know to go directly to you. So in this report, that's like by far the biggest conversion channel. And that may be a little bit unusual. It's kind of unique to each individual business. But if we look at, for example, the second one, where paid search way outperforms email, almost by more than double. And so that might mean that even though email is an important channel because most of our traffic is coming from email, paid search is actually getting us more paying customers. And so we want to make sure that we're not over prioritizing email to where we stop paying attention to paid search, for example. And then finally, the fifth report is benchmarking. This allows you to compare yourself across channels with other competing people within the same industry. Now, this report I don't think is necessarily the most accurate one, because the industry that Google tags you within is sometimes not necessarily what, the same type of industry that you might qualify yourself within. It's sort of automated by Google's machine learning process. But it is a useful report to at a glance kind of see, hey, am I, in general performing better or worse than my peers in particular areas? Is my email marketing performing better, or am I doing better in social or worse? And then we can kind of determine based on that, where the direction we should go with our marketing strategy. Great, and now we're going to go over some helpful tips and tricks. So annotations are a really useful feature. They allow us to essentially add a text-based note or memo to any point on a timeline. So for example, here we have a sessions graph, and we've marked October 17th as the date that the product was actually featured on Good Morning America. And so we can see a traffic spike here. And that's really important because we want to look back, this happened in 2017. So maybe a year from now, we're looking at this report and we're like, what happened to make this traffic peak at this point? And we see, oh, the product was mentioned on GMA. That would be the type of information that Google Analytics wouldn't be able to provide to you, but you as a marketer with that information can add it so that it gives more context to some of the information that helps tell the story a little bit more. Custom alerts are another powerful feature that allow you to essentially create an email notification when some activity has or possibly has not occurred. So for example, here we have a no order alert. And this is really important for a business that would expect to receive at least one e-commerce transaction every day. If, for example, you went a day without an order, that might be a red flag that there's a problem with the e-commerce system might be down, or there's a problem with the transaction payment processor. And so we would want to immediately know when that's happening. And so we can set up an alert ahead of time that if a day goes by where there's no order alert, it notifies you immediately so you can mitigate that right away. So these can be configured on a number of different metrics, but in this case, it's based on the e-commerce conversion criteria. And then, of course, we can share and automate reports. So one of the challenges with GA is that for people who don't have access to the platform, or stakeholders that want to get metrics out of the system, GA provides a really useful reporting interface for doing so. We can export the report as a Excel or comma-separated values data file, spreadsheet, or as a PDF, which would include the graphics and visualizations that are within the platform. And we can set up different frequencies. So we can send an email to important stakeholders on a daily basis or weekly, monthly, whatever the time span would be important to review these reports, and have a completely automated reporting setup. So that can be really helpful for marketers and stakeholders to get a vision or visualization of their data at any point in time. Great, and so some important resources that you can use to learn more about Google Analytics are, of course, the Google Analytics section of the WhereWare blog. The URL is that below. We're constantly updating new information and keeping up with best practices in GA. So you can find a lot of really actionable tips and tricks here on the analytics page of our blog, as well as the official Google Analytics help documentation page on support.google.com. This is very useful to really get a deep dive into all of the functionalities that are available in GA, but it doesn't quite explain things from a kind of step-by-step standpoint. And then finally, the Google Analytics Debugger plugin. This is a very useful tool. It's a Chrome extension that allows you to actually, in real time, go to any website on the internet that has Google Analytics installed, and you can see exactly where those tracking tags are and how they've configured their page. And that can be very useful for you learning how to use the tool by kind of seeing in real-life examples or case studies, how you would want to implement it based on another existing implementation. Great, so some key takeaways, things that we want to keep in mind when using GA. We want to make sure that we learn the lingo to better understand the tool. If we understand the concepts that we've talked about here, I think it's going to simplify a lot of the information that you'll find on the internet and in training materials about GA. The second part that makes Google a very powerful tool is that you're able to customize and manage the reports that you actually need. Sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of data or so you're sort of drowning in numbers. And GA makes it very useful to really drill down into the specific and information that's relevant for you at a specific time. And so I think it's very useful for customizing reports that only you actually need. And then, we want to be able to track activity on every channel, including desktop, mobile, and tablet. So GA provides that really powerful functionality to split and segment the data that's coming in really in a kind of automatic way and be able to tell, hey, what are my most successful marketing campaigns? Is it through email? Is it through social? And we're able to prioritize and budget for those within our marketing mix. And of course, it allows you to pay attention to your audience's behavior. I think many times as marketers, we often have preconceived notions, or we get married to our personal prejudices, and we sometimes forget that looking at the actual behavior of our audience is really the most important thing. And this platform really gives us a tool to understand how users are actually using the website and the app, or what have you, the e-commerce platform. We can really see what's actually successful and what's actually working compared to what we think should be working. And of course, the final takeaway is to really just get started with the platform and play around. When you open a new Google Analytics platform, you're given a demo data set from Google. That's a really useful tool to learn how to build reports, segment data, and not have any fear of messing up your existing business data. So that's a really cool kind of playground for you to really get used to the platform and really start to build some experience and skills with it. Great, so thanks everybody. That is my portion of the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And with that, I'll give it back to Nora to close this out.
Thanks so much, James. We are offering free 30-minute consultations to help with one of our customer insights experts, such as James, to really help you get a handle of Google Analytics or any other analytics needs or data integrations that you may need. Like I mentioned earlier, if you missed the first couple minutes of the webinar, we're recording this. We'll send out the recording, the slides that we went over today. We also have a how to get started actually setting up your Google Analytics account, because we didn't go over that today. We have a PDF of that we'll be sharing. And we have a checklist as well that goes through everything that we talked about here that you can keep on hand when you're setting up your account, when you're getting into those reports, and when you really start playing around with Google Analytics. We're just going to go over a couple questions. I do want to be mindful of everyone's time because this is the 30-minute time frame style of the webinar. So if we don't get to your questions, feel free to reach out to us, or if later today you're thinking about it and you're like, oh man, I really wish I asked XYZ, just reach out. All of our contact information is here on this slide. So I know a couple people asked about where you find the benchmarking report, and that can be found in reports and then go to audience. So you can find that benchmarking report there. We have another good question here, James. So if cookies are cleared, will a visit be tracked as a new visit, even if that person previously visited the site?
Yes. So a cookie, the way that Google tracks a user is only by the cookie. And so if they clear their information, then basically any new session counts them as a new user. So this is kind of why Google Analytics, you have to take the unique user count with a grain of salt, because it's really based on only a temporary ID. We have to understand that people frequently will frequently clear those out of their cache, but typically, you kind of rely on potentially, maybe a week's worth or a month's worth of browsing activity before people do that, just on average. But yes, so the short and sweet answer is that once the cookie is deleted, it counts as a new user.
Great. How does Google Analytics filter out bots or other inauthentic visitors? So how can I ensure that my results aren't being skewed by something like this?
Oh, that's a good question. So within the admin panel of Google Analytics, you want to set up a view. And so you can create a filtered view that allows us to, there's actually a very simple on and off checkbox within the filter view of, or the filter view configuration within the admin panel. And it basically, it automatically will filter out any bot activity because Google is receiving, it basically has a database of identified bot activity on the internet. And so they're cross-referencing any visitor that matches, that list. And so if you check that box, it will automatically remove the most likely offenders in terms of bot traffic and things that will really skew your data in a negative way. So you have to configure that view really in the initial setup phase of Google Analytics because historical data, it doesn't really exist in Google. Like the view only captures information at the point of creating it. So if you want to make sure that you're creating filtered views from the beginning of basically the moment that you create a filtered view is the moment that your data starts to populate that view, but you can't get data before that period. So important to set up your filters early on to make sure that you're able to remove some of that bot traffic and eliminate kind of contaminated data within your Google org.
Great, thanks. We're going to go with one more question today. So are you able to track company names visiting your site or individuals visiting your site?
No. So Google does not track personally identifiable information. This is it's a business decision that they've made to protect the privacy of people on the internet. So essentially your Google Analytics measures people essentially in kind of an anonymous way where you as the marketer can't drill down to a specific individual and find out, details of their email address or, what company they work for, et cetera. It's meant to provide sort of broad insight into user behavior, but not specific information on an individual.
Great, thanks so much. Looks like we're at 11:30 now, so because this is the 30-minute webinar, we're going to wrap up here. If you have any questions, like I said, that come up, feel free to reach out to us at info@whereaware.com, or you can fill out our Contact Us form on our website at whereaware.com/contact. And look out for the email either later today or tomorrow morning with the slides, the recording, and the couple of resources that I mentioned earlier. So thanks so much, James, and thanks so much for everybody who joined us today. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.